Hi, Greg. It's me, Hugh.
Hello, Hugh.
I'm going to do another full moon video tonight.
Well, we definitely have plenty of things we could talk about.
This is August the 22nd, Sunday. Full moon, 100% full moon. And see it behind me? There it is.
Yeah,
Right, that with that side or that side, it's behind me there.
yeah.
Full moon. And this is
You're on Easter Island tonight, right?
Greg Bowie, and I'm Squire Boone, and we're at the Alamo on a full moon. So,
The Alamo's on Easter Island, so we're good.
So I'm Hugh Squire, the owner of Bottom Line New York, and I've owned Bottom Line New York since the 60s. I'm a publisher from Foley Federal Court, and if anyone remembers, they gave you a lie and told you Mr. Foley was beheaded the day after 9/11. It's all propaganda and BS from the United States government. Go ahead, Greg. I never let you talk, so tonight I'm going to let you start it off, and I'll be quiet unless you make a mistake. So what do you want to talk about tonight?
Well, you pointed out some pretty interesting things this week, and I always wonder how you find these things because, I mean, I was watching the movie that you told me to watch, and it's a few years old. It's called Merlin's Apprentice. It's actually a 3-part miniseries. It's not just one movie. And the second one, 30 minutes into it, they said some pretty amazing things. And to set it up for those that haven't watched that, it's a story about Arthur and Camelot, and of course, JFK's family was called Camelot, and their time in the White House is often referred to as Camelot. And it's amazing that on this particular moment, one of the people that betrayed Arthur, his name was Graham, and the apprentice, Merlin's apprentice, he hollers out and he says, "I see you, Graham, and your band of traitors, and your group of traitors," or whatever. And I said, "My gosh, that's exactly what's going on." And then it said at the end, Graham represents the religious con in America too, where Jim Baker's daughter married Billy Graham's kid. I think I got that right, or maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, so they're married together, and he leads prayer. So Graham leads prayer, and he's the religious con in this country with Baker. And it's interesting. You mentioned the Baker. They mentioned Squire. Squire was in this whole movie. So while he says, "I see you, Graham, and your band of traitors," he's standing next to Squire, and actually the person's name was Brian the Squire, but it was Squire, and he was the first to die and the first resurrected when they found the Holy Grail. Then there was one more interesting part about that show, and the blot on Camelot was not just Graham, but it was also somebody by the name of Weston. And they said, "Well, you're the primary, you're the big stain on Camelot. You're the blot. You're the problem. You're what caused all this to happen." And I'm thinking, okay, Weston, man, that sure sounds a lot like Westhouse. And that's the family in your life that killed Hoffa, and probably they or somebody very close to them killed Kennedy. And I said, my gosh.
I'm going to interrupt you there. Those were the people that kidnapped me. And the whole book, Merlin and Merlin's Apprentice, was written by the Christian Ford, as my family ran Henry Ford's Dearborn mansion. And none of this is coincidence, Greg. In Michigan, where we ran Henry Ford's mansion, that was my uncle Squire. Graham ran the media that hid all the murdered Oakland County kids that were murdered next to me and thrown on my property. As my family member, Gerald Ford, became your president when they threw Nixon and Agnew out of office. And all of this is interrelated. Graham Media with Barr and Osbourne, Wallace, Long, O'Brien, they've hidden my truth of the real killers of the Oakland County kids for 7 decades as they collected $20 million a year in federal taxpayer money to hide the truth of the governors that kidnapped me and murdered my twin when I was 4 years old in 57 on the day they murdered Admiral Byrd. And in history, they say Admiral Byrd died of a heart attack, but my mother was his family member and she was a nurse from World War II and she told me he was murdered. I tend to believe my mother. Go on, Greg.
Well, when they when they killed, or when they removed the blot of Weston, then they said, okay, now Camelot is eligible or able to be revived again. And the first one to come back to life was Squire. And I realized what Ford there that made the movie was saying. They're saying when the country hears your truth again and that comes out, they can heal what happened to Kennedy, and and justice can be served, and Camelot or can be restored.
That's correct, Greg, and that's how the union at Ford Motor Company they used to back me. When people tried to kill me, the union at Ford paint plant, they'd take me out and surround me with 200 guns in Kings Corner, Michigan, and protect me all the way back into the 60s and 70s. And I dated Carrie, and you got Carrie Firestarter, and everybody at my school denies I exist as they use my stolen trademark. And everybody at my school are part of the people that framed Lee Harvey Oswald for Kennedy's murder. That was done by the same governors who kidnapped me in 57. And I'm the truth of all of this. So Christian Ford paralleled my life with the Merlin's Apprentice. And I've been aware of that all my life. And
amazing, these producers know this. All these Hollywood producers know your story. They put it in their movies, and yet the average American doesn't know it.
Yeah, and at the end they put a rider and say any likeness to anybody alive is purely coincidental. But I'm Squire, and then the main character in Merlin's Apprentice is Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson is my family member, President Andrew Jackson. And then they had Sam Neill, and Neill, that's how they tortured me. Now they always made me get on my knees at 4 on a cold floor and stay on my knees all day as they tortured me. And they beat my twin to death kneeling on a floor next to me, chained to a toilet as they sexually abused us.
Right.
And then it's interesting to me, Senator Graham runs all that media in Detroit. That's Trump's best friend. And Trump's best friend in New York, his tax attorney, sold me the land I stopped Noriega's drugs on, the Fast and Furious, the gun and drug trade in 1979, 1980. Little kids were being overdosed in my driveway. So I stopped the drug trade doing it, but I don't exist. The people selling the drugs, Larson and Henry, Hank, Blanchard, Brooks, those people never went to jail. I went to jail for a year because I protected little kids in my driveway.
That was about 3 years after Hoffa was murdered.
That was about 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, I moved on to that ranch about 2 years. About 3 years later. You're correct.
Yeah.
And then my daughter was kidnapped. And I hired a law firm to protect her, but they lost the case. They murdered the judge in my daughter's case. Judge Hunter v. Stare, and they murdered the doctor, the psychiatrist I took her to after she was kidnapped, James Brandenburg. And all of that was done in the county next to Oakland County by Sheriff Hackle. And in Oakland County, you had Bruce Towers, and that was my music teachers, Mr. Towers, and then the guy that took my photographs when I was a little kid, George Towers, and all of that is related crime that predicted 9/11 before the Twin Towers were even built. And they murdered little kids to make all these things happen and to get $20 million in taxpayer money into Oakland County every year. And L. Brooks Patterson did that. L. Brooks Patterson even murdered his own nephew in a jail cell after I and Teddy Brooks Oglesby spent a weekend together. They murdered him 5 minutes after he left me, just like they murdered Judge Hunter Stare at Selfridge Air National Guard, and James Brandenburg as I and my daughter sat in his office. All these people were murdered and then covered up. They said the judge drank himself to death. They said that the doctor I and my daughter were talking to was out jogging and had a heart attack, and all of these are lies coming out of Oakland County from Sheriff Hackle. And that's the county next door to Oakland County. And in Macomb County, Tim McVeigh and John Nichols were my neighbors. And in Oakland County, John Nichols was my neighbor. And none of this is coincidence. This is the military and the police and the White House covering up the real truth of the Oakland County child killings.
Right.
And the murder of Jimmy Hoffa and John F. Kennedy. I'm in all of these things. And there's movies about it in roundabout ways written by the Ford family. I was publishing the Ford family when 9/11 happened, and George Bush blamed the Ford family's drummer for funding the Muslims. And it's total propaganda and lies in media from the Bush family. And I'm the truth of these things. So go on, Greg, back to you.
Yeah. I was checking out some stories here today here in the news, and you'd mentioned here a little bit ago before we got on about Camelot going to Vietnam, and they're comparing it in the fall of Saigon, right as Biden is pulling out of Afghanistan. And it's interesting that Saigon occurred exactly 90 days to pull out of Saigon. That failed 90 days before Hoffa was killed. I found that very interesting in 1975. And
another interesting fact about Jimmy Hoffa is when the FBI detained me for his murder the next day in my Troy, Michigan driveway, and I didn't have anything to do with his murder. My truck dispatch area was dynamited that day, the day after he disappeared from the Sly Fox, and my mother-in-law was with him, Louise Westhouse, and that's your Weston in that movie where the Merlin's holding up the bridge. Merlin is a warlock, a magician, and it's interesting that I'm the head warlock on Earth, according to the Harry Potter books in England. The Dangerous Beast, Squire and Kowalski. And Kowalski was my lead player from Germany and Vietnam. And Bottom Line, which was stolen in New York in 1969 by DuPont and Cummins and Steve Austin. In New York right now, you have the person taking Cuomo's place, the guy who's been raping, or not raping, but making sexual advances on all the women around him, the governor. Well, the woman that's replacing him, she has something to do with Austin Steel Company. And Steve Austin is the guy that would come out stealing the trademark Bottom Line from me in the 60s, he'd always say, and that's the bottom line, as he drank a Budweiser. And Bud was my father-in-law. And Bud most likely buried Jimmy Hoffa, but the media never says the truth. So I was detained by about 7 or 8 FBI agents in front of all my kids in Troy, Michigan, about 12 hours after Hoffa disappeared. Because I was in the Teamsters Union, and my dispatch area at Morrison was dynamited that morning. And I'd been.
Yeah, and then Morrison died real soon after that too, didn't he?
No, Jim Morrison had been dead already.
Okay.
My main competition at Morrison, who was John Wayne, was Leonard. Leonard Skinner's plane went down after Morrison was killed, and that was
Yeah.
Morrison and Leonard fighting over music money. And I was ASCAP via my publisher driving a truck. So I know all these things. I lived it. I was working with the Kennedy family, all of them, in sessions of Congress to change the Berne Convention laws as they were murdered. And all media denies I exist. And then here's Christian Ford giving you Merlin's Apprentice, Squire, and Andrew Jackson. I'm Squire and Andrew Jackson's family, and I'm head warlock on earth, according to the girl that wrote the Harry Potter books. And Merlin was head warlock on earth, wasn't he?
Yeah, in that movie, yeah.
And I'm marked like that in all of America's media. I had all of my FCC licenses at the age of 12 from a federal building. At 12, I could put my FCC license in a TV station and align the tuner. I'm not some, crazy, dumb little guy. I really had all my FCC licenses, and I would go into Channel 7 and talk to Bill Bonds and Sonny Elliott on Channel 2. And I delivered to Bill Bonds' businesses and Sonny Elliott's businesses. And Bill Bonds, the head news anchor at Channel 7, his daughter died leaving my performance Christmas Eve in right across the street from where Hoffa disappeared. And none of this is coincidence, Greg. None of it.
Right.
But I don't exist. Back to you. That needed to be, those things needed to be added.
Sure. I was just noticing when you mentioned Morrison there I looked up his when he died there real quick, and he died one day before your birthday, 4 years before Hoffa.
Right. July 4th. Yeah, that's when they murdered my Terry Heath, who's Sarah Heath Palin's family.
Mm-hmm.
That's Sarah Heath. Palin, that's her maiden name, Heath. And Terry Heath was my fiance, and she told me 5 minutes before I found her murdered, somebody was stalking her when she walked her dog. She walked her dog, and I found her hung on her dog's leash. So those policemen stalking her murdered her. But the police turn a blind eye to murders they commit. And I have open murder cases, but they've put natural causes on dismembered bodies and called Terry's murder a suicide when I know they're not. Terry didn't commit suicide. She was looking forward to marrying me. And Victoria was dismembered. And this would be a good place to, I've even shown you the hospital records where they admit raping her, haven't I?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, she choked on a drop of water, and then while she was unconscious, getting a battery changed out in her room by a doctor from India, 2 of his male nurses, they raped her. They sodomized her and raped her while she was knocked out. And I even confronted them, and they argued with me and told me, no, that didn't happen. But then in in the hospital records themselves, the next day, the rape is in the hospital records.
Right. Yeah.
But because and you know this is true, Greg, you've read the records, and I have all
Yeah.
the records. I have 10,000 pages of hospital records from my murdered wives. The police turn a blind eye to the murders and they never investigate them, even though there are open murder cases. I opened murder cases. They had to open a murder case because my wife's ears were missing.
Well, they arrested the entire police force after you opened that murder case.
Yeah, in 2 cities, the entire police force, they were using fake names and badge numbers on all my reports and selling drugs.
Then the detective that
And
took
I
the
had
report,
nothing to do with that. The FBI did that 3 or 4 years later.
yeah, now that detective that took your report is now trying to tell you, they're trying to tell you that they never existed.
Correct. Yeah, the detective and the head sheriff in Greenville, Tennessee. I call with new information about my wife's murder, more proof, and they don't exist. And I knew that detective and the sheriff for over 12 years while I and my wife lived in Greenville, Tennessee. So I
And you
know
still
that.
have the phone with the numbers on it, everything where you've had the conversations.
Yeah, it's unbelievable the amount of people the White House paid off to cover up the murders of 4 of my wives.
This is why you're in all the movies, and they still don't see it.
Greg.
So, we're gonna say next. Yeah, we were gonna talk about this this girl that was killed down in Texas, and her name was Duncan, and killed in Harris County. So,
Oh,
you
and
wanna say anything about
the
that?
Caddy homes, KATY homes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the government that they're threatening me and telling me to shut up again. If you remember when I was a young kid, after they killed JFK, on the very day they killed JFK, they murdered the entire Duncan family next door to
Right.
my family's farm. And they told the world they all ate rat poison. Can you imagine 5 kids sitting down and opening up a box of rat poison and having it for breakfast?
Right, and President Johnson even called them that day to take the pressure off, or to take the attention away from Kennedy's murder to these poor little
Correct.
kids who were murdered
Yeah,
instead.
they murdered those kids to take the pressure off of Johnson. That's
And
correct.
now this Duncan, who was killed here the other day in Texas, in Harris County, was shot 50 times.
Yeah, so
No,
it was
just a young girl,
you
just
know it
just
was
out
a
of college.
mafia. You know it was a mafia hit. They wanted her dead, and they wanted her dead in her garage in Harris County. That's where they
Again,
murdered.
to take the
That's where they
pressure
murdered.
off of the real
That's where
mess.
they murdered Terry Heath. Was in the garage of our home.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, same situation.
Uh,
Hmm.
and that's the government that hides me in all media. People like Major Tom Garrett at CBS, they hide me. On the day Tom Garrett destroyed my income from his White House journalist office with Obama. On the day my wife was murdered, and my attorney, who was on his way to the district attorney's office to file her murder charges, was murdered. CBS put Tom Garrett, who was responsible for these things, and he was Obama's White House journalist at the time. They put him in on a new show called The Takeout, and I bet you they gave him a few $1 million as he destroyed my income. And then they even hired a second reporter named Tom Garrett to confuse the public when I started saying this in videos 7 years ago. I have all the documents to prove Tom Garrett destroyed my income on the day my wife was murdered. I wish that one of these people I named, like Osbourne or Garrett or Steve Austin, if one of them would just take me to court, boy, it would open a can of worms. But Jesse Ventura or Alex Jones or Julian Assange, none of them ever take me to court because they don't want the can of worms open.
Right.
And you know that, Greg.
Oh, it'll be a huge national incident for a long time. Yeah.
It would change, it would change what they tell you is history. Nobody in this country knows any real history. I'm the real history of Hoffa, Oklahoma bombing, 9/11, Kennedy's murder, Hoffa's murder, Oakland County. I'm Oakland County child killings. They murdered kids for 20 years. On the day Hoffa disappeared, the murders of the kids stopped. Isn't that interesting, Greg?
Right.
But
Right.
one of the last kids murdered was Timmy King, as Gerald Ford, whose real name was King, not Ford, took office. They
Right.
murdered Timmy King on that day. They kidnapped him off of Gardner Street, and I'm the Gardner family.
Yeah. And Ford's mom was Gardner.
Yeah, and then when the FBI detained me for Hoffa's murder, all the child killing stopped. And that was the day after Hoffa disappeared. And they detained me before they ever
So it's
detained
unreal.
Chucky O'Brien or detained anybody else for Hoffa's murder. They had detained me.
Wow.
Tried to tell me I did it. I was a young man raising 7 kids, and only one of them was my real kid. I adopted the other kids. Prior to Hoffa, they tried to tell me I robbed a bank. I had the state police surround my car with 7 kids in it, with shotguns pulled, and they tried to tell me I robbed a bank.
Here's another thing I just noticed, Hugh.
What's that?
Gerald Ford was shot December 26th, or shot at. They missed.
Now,
But
that's
he
when
was shot at December 26th. That's one day after the murder of one of your wives.
no, my fiance, Kiki
Yeah,
Nelson, Ricky Nelson's cousin. And
Right.
her sister was on the cover of Maybelline. And I was the line. I was bottom line. Johnny Cash was walking the line. And the reason Johnny Cash was walking the line is because he was put in a prison that my uncle built. And on his first album, Folsom Prison Blues, he tells you right at the beginning of the album, he was put in jail for picking apples. When a guy tells you he was picking apples, it means he was raping girls. That's what it means.
Oh, I read that wrong. Ford died on December 26th. Sorry.
Oh, he died on the same day my fiance.
Not when he was shot.
No, that's when they murdered Kiki, Christmas Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everything in my life is synchronous like that, Greg. And you know this.
And that was 2000. No, it was Terry. When was Kiki?
1991.
Yeah. Okay.
She wasn't even 35 years old yet. And she was healthier than me. And I'm 70 now.
Wow.
You know, Kiki could beat me arm wrestling, leg wrestling. She was a real healthy girl. She liked to do yoga every day, and there's nothing wrong with her. There was no reason for her to die like that. She was murdered. All of my fiancés and my wives, I found them dead. I revived them with CPR, Greg.
Yeah, I know.
Flew them to hospitals, and then the government murdered them a second time. Always after dismembering the body. And then they wrote natural causes on dismembered bodies. Do you remember how many nurses covered up the fact that my wife, Victoria Mellon's ears were missing?
How many nurses?
There was 4 shifts and 12 nurses a day. And for 2 weeks, they hid the fact that somebody cut her ear off. They propped her up on a pillow and put pillows all around where her ear was cut off so I couldn't see it, and kept her sedated for 30 days while they did things like cut her ears off and sodomize her.
Yeah.
Along with the 12 nurses, Greg, 15 doctors looked in on my wife, and 12 nurses and 15 doctors for a period of 2 weeks never told me her husband and her only family that her ear was gone
And then they called you with the advocate's phone.
from her hospital bed as they cut her ear off.
Right. And you had the advocate's phone number. So there's the phone number
Right.
right there. And they're screaming the name of the prosecutor.
And then I had
in
all
Tennessee
these
the other
phone
day.
numbers. I had a magic jack on a computer, and all these phone calls from the advocate's phone, the advocate in the hospital. In Tennessee, they give you, when you're a patient, you have an advocate who's supposed to protect you. Well, these people in 2011, as they sodomized, cut my wife's ear off, gave her they gave her 15 blood transfusions because she choked on a drop of water. Can you even imagine this, Greg?
It's
And
unbelievable.
they covered up the fact that her ear was missing. And then they wrote natural causes on a dismembered body. Why was her ear gone? And why did they hide it from me? And why was she sodomized sitting in a hospital bed unconscious by 2 male nurses? And they hid all this from the public. And the police helped them hide it. In 2 cities, the police are still helping to hide this. And that's just Victoria's murder, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just
And
one.
then you know everything I'm saying. I have the hospital records that prove it. While they told me she wasn't sodomized, they were giving her blood transfusions because she was bleeding out her lower, her rectum,
Right.
from being sodomized. And Victoria, my wife, she never had sex with me. We didn't have sex. She was in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy.
Right. You married her because she was.
There was nothing wrong with her rectum, and she wasn't
Right.
bleeding when I revived her and took her into the hospital to be checked out.
Right. You married her because you wanted to be able to do her meds and stuff.
Right.
You didn't have anybody to help her.
Because her father saved my life, and that was Bill Merlin. And you got a movie from a Japanese actor called Kill Bill, and her father was Special Forces in the Navy with my father in World War II with John F. Kennedy. And all of my wives have fathers in the Navy in World War II under my family member, Admiral Byrd, and they served with John F. Kennedy in the Navy. So their daughters were murdered while married to me, dismembered, raped, tortured, and murdered. And all media covered up the fact that the daughters of Navy men who served with JFK in World War II were murdered by doctors from India and Japan. And these things were done on purpose, and they were hired by Obama's White House. And I'll say this until the day I die because it's true. And to this day, they don't investigate anything. You've looked at the hospital records I've showed you. I have 20,000 pages. I'm scanning them online. I'm putting the medical records. Here they are, Greg, parts of them. Here's the next 100 pages I'm going to scan and put on a hard drive and eventually put online. And anybody on earth will be able to see. They sodomized my wife, dismembered her, murdered her in a hospital after I saved her life at our home.
Yeah. That hospital and the government should be paying you millions and millions of dollars for this and
But
be
they
put out of
couldn't pay me
business.
enough to replace the two wives they murdered.
No,
It
I
wasn't
understand.
2 wives, it was 4. In 40 years, they murdered 4 of my wives, and they couldn't pay me enough to replace the kids they murdered around me for 20 years, or they couldn't pay.
I don't mean it's about money, but I mean, it's about justice. There should be.
Well, prior to all of this, Greg, they stole $2 trillion from my business. And then the whole reason they've done all these things, Greg, is because I'm the Fuller family. And I'm the Harris family. We're in the Smithsonian. You have Kamala Harris pretending to be my family right now. The Harris family was Harris Polls. We owned Harris Publications, which was like Life and Book magazine. before you were born, Greg. 264 worldwide magazines my family owned. Harris Publications. That's my family. Fuller. You have a Fuller transmission in every semi in the country. You go 5 gears, you pop the pin, you go 5 more. That's a Fuller transmission. You have a Borg Warner transmission. Fuller owned Borg Warner. Fuller owned the patents on every bus in the country. Every bus in the world was a Fuller patent. That's my family.
Yeah.
Fuller owned the patents on all the milk trucks. Nobody uses milk trucks anymore, but back then when I was a kid, everybody got their milk delivered in a milk truck. My family owned the milk truck patent. My family owns the patent on the vans. The Chevy van was the Fuller family's patent. I mean, any one of these things, Greg, look at the money involved and the amount of jobs involved in it.
Yeah.
Imagine making every
tractor.
bus in the country and then you own the patent on it.
Yeah.
Imagine making every milk truck in the country and you own the patent on it. Imagine making every transmission and every semi on Earth.
Yeah.
And how many people did my family employ, Greg? That was my inheritance that was stolen.
Yeah. Hundreds of thousands, yeah.
And then I didn't even care about that inheritance. I started my own publishing company called Bottom Line, and they stole Bottom Line, Weiner and Associates, next to Dire Straits' house, across the street from where Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, and where Ted's restaurant was, and you got Ted Danson and Whoopi Goldberg to help hide my truth, along with Oprah and Squire. And all of these people attacked me. As a child, before I was 20 years old, Greg, I was murdered 3 times. DOA.
Get over the hammer.
All of the hospital records and all of the police reports after being murdered 3 times before I was 19 years old, they don't exist. They all disappeared. I put in a Freedom of Information Act in Warren, Michigan for my murder report, and the detective who handled it, I was denied the request, Greg. And this is after my wife's murders. And this is where Senator Graham's family runs the media. He runs the TV. He runs the radio stations. I own Baker College on Hughes Street. But imagine the money they stole from me, Greg. My inheritance was the buses. Just think of just one bus line, Greyhound bus. That was my inheritance. Just think.
This is why Ava Gardner could go gambling $80,000 a day. She had all that money.
Yeah, right. Correct. All of her sisters stole my inheritance with my half brother. And that's correct, Greg. And you got Governor Christie. He was elected in New Jersey. Christie is my cousins who stole my inheritance. And there's no lying. They forged my name on stocks and lied to me. As the
Well,
guy,
they still have money to be politicians.
as the Harris and Gardner and Fuller family side, they forged my name.
Right. And why the Gardners run the Motley Fool and run the whole stock
That's the school.
advisory
That's
thing
the
there.
school next to the school in Warren. I was a teacher in Warren Consolidated. Mott High School is next to Warren High in the Warren Consolidated school system. I was a teacher with Jim Garrison at Warren Consolidated. My wives were murdered on the Manning Ranch. Garrison and Manning co-created the JFK archives, in which all of my neighbors framed Oswald. And
Yeah.
Oswald was dating Mr. Baker's wife, Judith. And he was framed by Mac Osbourne's family. Mac Osbourne's family had kidnapped me, and they were killing the kids in Oakland County, the governor of Michigan. Governor Osbourne, way before you were born, Greg.
Yeah.
And these are the people who murdered the Kennedys. It's just interesting. You have Biden and Kamala Harris pretending they're me. He used Gonzalez's name for the head of ICE after I stopped Noriega's drugs on my farm, which Trump's tax attorney sold to me back in '78. Right. The drugs and gun were being run off of a 7 square mile farm I purchased from Trump's tax attorney in Michigan. And then Trump borrowed $5 billion 5 times from my family's banks and never paid a penny back, did he?
Right.
Interesting how all of this fits together. And it wasn't enough for those people to steal my inheritance, which was the Chevy van, every bus in the country, every milk truck. Bottom line, New York, I was a worldwide publisher. And now they're stealing Harris polls and Harris magazines and Harris and the Smithsonian. And gee, when Biden can't even remember, Biden, did you see him on TV? They asked him a question and he didn't know which services his son was in. He didn't know if he was in the Navy or Army. And he didn't even know which war he served in because he has dementia, Greg.
Right.
And as he has dementia and he pulls out of Afghanistan, leaving almost $1 trillion of top-notch American equipment that you and I and everybody in this country paid for.
Yeah, that news story said 80-some billion dollars worth.
85 billion, and it'll be more than that, Greg. And it's
billion with a B.
It's not just tanks and guns, it's electronic equipment that's top-notch. Mm-hmm. And the Taliban, they'll sell it to China or give it to China.
Right.
And Kamala Harris is from Indonesia, which is China. And she's not the Harris family here in America. There are no Asians. There are no Black women in my family.
Fascinating synchronicity. What's going on over there right now? I wrote here, how is it possible that Camelot is in Vietnam? Remember the pullout from Saigon 90 days before Hoffa was killed in '75. As this pullout goes on now in Afghanistan, did you know that Vietnam has one of the lowest COVID case counts in the world? Will Biden get sick soon? Gerald Ford was president in '75.
They didn't have any COVID in Vietnam until a year after you had deaths in Wuhan.
Yeah, and then still the numbers are way lower than the rest of the world.
And then you know the first deaths here were in King County. I'm the King family. Yeah. That's President Ford. His real name is King.
King and Gardner, yeah.
Yeah, and I grew up with Fred King. Bob.
Hang on 1 second. Hear this synchronicity here, and then I'll let you keep going there. But Gerald Ford was president in '75. On September 22nd, 1975, Ford was shot at by Moore, and today is August 22nd as Camelot goes to Vietnam. I just find that just fascinating that all these things over decades later are just almost perfectly synchronous.
Oh, everything. The world has turned on my shoulders since the day I was born, Greg, and I've been sitting here watching it, fighting them alone. And people tell me I'm crazy or a liar or I'm forging things, and I'm not.
Right.
I'm related to the presidents, and nobody admits to it.
But you were just talking about how Biden is coming down with dementia pretty hard, and I'm kind of wondering if while she's out there running around the world,
it might be Alzheimer's, but there's definitely something really wrong with that 78-year-old man. And then at a time when Kamala should be helping him, she runs away to Vietnam where there isn't any COVID-19 cases.
Right.
And then she comes from a Chinese associate, Indonesia. She's pretending to be the American Harris family, and she's not.
I wonder what kind of, payola she might be being exposed to while she's over there right now. Biden took his $1.5 billion. I wonder what kind of deal she.
I would venture to say that the full-term abortions that her and Joe already have probably the abortions and the organ transplants are sold through Vietnam and China. And they want full-term abortions because the heart's fully formed, the lungs are fully formed. They can incubate them and then put them in people. That's a big, what's it cost to have a heart put in your chest, Greg?
Right. That's why Camelot prosecuted that guy that exposed Planned Parenthood.
This White House is the most demonic White House this country's ever known.
Mm-hmm.
And they all think that they elected some good families, behind Trump, the bad guy. And they're all corrupt. All three parties are corrupt. And you know that, Greg. You know me, and you've researched my documents. It'll be in your book. Yeah. All three parties work together, and they're fleecing America. And America, you just got fleeced again. Mm-hmm. And all of you're going to have to take another booster shot. They want to give you a card so you could travel across state borders. And as they give away all your military secrets to the Chinese, this is what Joe Biden is giving China in return for Hunter Biden, the crackhead's $1.5 billion in payroll. Who pays a crackhead $1.5 billion, Greg?
Right.
Nobody but the Chinese.
Yeah, on top of that huge salary they were giving him too.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable what's going on. And then you can't even believe any of those stories are true because everything they have never told you the truth of who killed the Kennedys. Sirhan didn't kill Bobby, and Oswald didn't kill JFK. These are fabricated stories. Foley was not beheaded by bin Laden's people, right, or the Taliban. This is all propaganda made in Hollywood news. Yeah, and I don't think it. I know it.
Oh, heck, you showed the pictures of.
They're hiding this. They are hiding my truth of who really killed Kennedy, who killed the kids in Oakland County, why Oklahoma bombing. Oklahoma federal building, that's where they did all the taxes in Oklahoma, as my federal tax license was stolen for Bottom Line. I was a worldwide publisher with a real IRS license. Tim McVeigh was my neighbor. So was John Nichols. So they blow up a federal building that does the taxes in Oklahoma. Why did they blow up the Panhandle, Greg? Don't you cook your eggs and breakfast in the Panhandle? You think maybe it was because they poisoned my food 24 times trying to kill me? You think maybe that's why they blew up the Panhandle, protecting me?
Interesting.
McVeigh and Nichols were the military in charge of protecting my federal publishing license. When you have a federal license, like I had FCC licenses, patents, copyrights, a federal worldwide publishing contract with a federal court. The military backs my licenses, not the police.
Right.
McVeigh and Nichols lost their fight to protect my stolen IRS license.
Wow.
And then they were framed for it. And then they gave you propaganda on TV. And I've made videos about all this. JFK's press secretary, just like Obama's JFK's press secretary stole my trademark and used it in a book with my next door neighbor, Mr. Nagy. He owns a cement company in Utica, Michigan, lived right next door to me. I used to throw him out of my house for giving women drugs and stealing their purses with a guy named Wayne Danielson, right there in Macomb County, where they murdered Judge Hunter Stair. And Nagy is no little guy. I mean, he's Lee Iacocca's son-in-law.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and Lee Iacocca, he designed the Ford Mustang. Oh, my family ran Fords. President Gerald Ford is really my family. He's King and Gardner. He's not Ford. I was publishing the real Ford family as Bush called the planes back to Selfridge, where they murdered Judge Hunter Stair and Dr. James Brandenburg in Oakland County, and Selfridge Air National Guard. that's the planes that Bush had Cheney recall on 9/11.
Wow.
As he said my name, and my own uncle, Mr. Mills, was filming Bush in the kindergarten class. One of my girlfriends put him in down in
Right.
Florida.
Yeah.
I lived in Florida. I lived at the Hemingway house in Florida before any of this happened. 25 years before it happened, I was living at the Hemingway Museum in Key West, Florida. I bought Miller a house. The FBI told you they found a spot of Hoffa blood in the house I bought for Miller. And now the whole story's changed, and now Hoffa's supposedly in a barrel in New Jersey, buried. Well, I got news for the government. I'm the guy that drove the barrels in a semi with W.C. Fields' kid from New Haven, Michigan to New Jersey. And then we distributed drugs all over the country from New Jersey pharmaceutical companies who make the drugs. They can't even keep their story straight when they lie about where Jimmy Hoffa was buried, as they hide me. And there's a record of this. I had accidents in that semi while I delivered the barrels.
Right.
There's police records, Greg, and I know right where they are. You know, so they can't even keep their story straight when they try to hide me, Greg.
I think, didn't you say Lady Gaga sort of gives away her name gives away the truth about where he's really buried.
Yeah, he's buried right under G&G. That's correct, Greg. And I can't even find that place on a map. It's just like I can't find the sheriff and the detective I knew for 12 years in Tennessee who helped murder my wives.
Yeah, I can't find it either.
Yeah, they all disappear, Greg. They all disappear.
There's another G&G, another kind of business not far from there. So I think
they all disappear, Greg. It's just amazing how they just rewrite stories and dates, and they make heroes out of murderers. They make heroes out of people who murder kids.
Yeah.
And then they change the dates of when the kids were murdered. And I'm well aware of all of this. I've watched them do it all my life. I've been watching them do it for 7 decades. And my best friend, and the people in my family, they control the CIA, Greg. Since the day I was born. The Navy funds and controls the CIA.
Yeah, relatives of Smedley Butler that wrote that famous book, War is a Racket. Even though you even have friends like that.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, Greg.
Yeah.
I can't say, I can't talk about CIA agents, but I can say that the Navy that controls the CIA agents, they're my family members, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every word I'm saying is true. And they marked me in every movie on earth. I can sit here all day long. You talked about, what movie did you talk about? Merlin's Apprentice?
Yeah, you were going to mention something about Warehouse 13.
Let's talk about, how about V? My wife, Victoria, was murdered at the end of the V season. Dr. House, what's his name? Dr. House. What's his real name, Greg? Do you remember?
Doogie Howser.
No, not Doogie Howser. Google the House TV series and tell me it's Laurie. It's Hugh Laurie. I'm Hugh and Laurie's my daughter. Oh, and he was Dr. House. He ran a hospital. That whole series marked the murder of my wives. And then
we'll go back to V and was there something else
V
about
was
V?
out. V was out, and that marked my wife Victoria, who they cut her ear off and sodomized her and then slit her throat Halloween Day, along with Warehouse 13, Warehouse
Yeah.
13 came out when my wife Nancy Fredericks' leg was removed. And her leg was removed by people like Perry and Cook. And I don't think this, I know this. And her new husband, I divorced Nancy Fredericks in 1972 when I was about 19 years old, 18, 19 years old. Because we didn't get along, and I walked in on her. She was cheating with a detective who was supposed to be protecting me from people who were murdering me. That detective's family was sleeping with my wife, and we'd only been married for a month. I didn't divorce her for sleeping with the detective that was supposed to be protecting my life. I mean, he was really protecting it. He was having sex with my wife. And then he had a kid with my wife, and my wife gave it my name. And I didn't divorce her for those things. I divorced her when she came up behind me and tried to push me down a flight of stairs one day with a butcher
That's
knife.
right. Now it's coming back to me.
With a butcher knife in her hand.
And that's
At
what was
that
on the
point, I
13.
decided I can't live with a woman who's 7 years older than me, screwing detectives who are supposed to be protecting me, and then trying to kill me. As a kid's born, she gives my name to who isn't my kid. I couldn't live with her anymore, so I divorced her. That was Nancy Fredericks. And when I married her, Joe Jacobs was her stepfather of IBM. He gave my cousin Gates the software to make his first computer at our wedding, Greg.
Yeah.
Back in 65. I was 15. She was over 21. She raped me. My father told me to file rape charges. I didn't. I said, no.
But this story was repeated in Warehouse 13, and that
The whole story by Mrs. Fredericks runs Warehouse 13. She's a Black woman. And there's a story to this. Nancy Fredericks, her mother was Betty Fredericks. Her father was Mr. Fredericks. You have Fredericks of Hollywood.
Mhm.
A motorcycle gang, my second wife, I wasn't married to my second wife yet, didn't even know who she was. Her brother ran a motorcycle gang called the Renegades.
Right.
And Nancy had a boyfriend from the Renegades. And that boyfriend tied her up to a bed and had the whole motorcycle club rape her before I ever knew her. All right, they pulled a train on Nancy Fredericks. And then they wrote a song about it and sang it to me at my wedding. It was by Ram Jam. And they even told me to get into Nancy's pants. They had to. It's the lyrics in the song, Greg. And the song is called Whoa, Oh, Black Betty by Ram Jam. Oh, so in Warehouse 13, Miss Fredericks, who runs it, is a Black woman. But it's all just coincidence, Greg. And then you have, as Victoria was murdered, my wife Victoria is murdered. As she was murdered, they gave you an episode called Trials on Warehouse 13. My second wife I married, I couldn't understand why a woman 15 years older than me hated my wife, Nancy Fredericks, so much. It's because Nancy put her boyfriend and several of the renegades in jail when they raped her, when they pulled a train on her in a Mount Clemens motel room. She survived that. She took them to court, put a couple of them in jail. My second wife, her brother was president of the Renegades. Oh, I didn't know that. She shows up in my life. She hates my second wife or my first wife. I didn't know why. She hated them because my first wife put her motorcycle friends in prison for pulling a train on her in a Mount Clemens motel room.
Yeah.
With her boyfriend. His name was Chuck. And then I was working for Chuck. The state of Michigan gave me a job working for Chuck. The very people who raped her. And her father at that time was governor of East Detroit. Or I'm sorry, not governor, mayor of East Detroit, where you got Ted Nugent. Well, Nancy Fredericks, her dad was governor of East Detroit, Michigan. As these bikers put her in a motel room, chained her to the bed and raped her. And it wasn't 1 or 2 or 20, it was 30 of them. You understand this, Greg?
Yeah.
So then my second wife shows up. She's 15 years older than me. And all of a sudden she loves me and she wants to help me. And this is what went on with my first 2 marriages, Greg. And the real interesting part is Joe Walsh at my Catholic church wouldn't marry Aya Nancy, who was pregnant with my kid after she raped me. But they married me to the family that pulled a train on Nancy, that same Catholic church, and Joe Walsh. They married me to her. After I paid them $5,000 to excommunicate Nancy after she tried to murder me.
This reminded me of when you said Chuck, it reminded me of Chuck Trainer from the Linda Lovelace thing and Deep Throat. And guess what? Linda Lovelace died at 53 years old. I'm thinking, well, they killed
my birthday and
not only
Linda
they killed
Lovelace.
Nancy, but they-
That's my birthday, and Nancy looked just like her, Greg.
yeah. Mhm.
It's not
That's
that.
unreal.
And then you have Snowden and Greg Snow. Greg Snow is one of the guys she would deep throat. It's not coincidence.
Right.
None of that's coincidence. And this is the media and the propaganda hiding my truth of who really killed the Kennedys. And they do it with porno, because when they kidnapped me and killed all those kids, they were using us in porno, Greg. And you know,
And then Trainer
don't
dies
get off
on
the
July
track now.
22nd.
Don't get off the track.
All right.
I'm talking about Warehouse 13, the season 3, episode 2, trials as they murdered Victoria. Well, my second wife was Mary. So trials, that is about Typhoid Mary, who was Mary Mellon, and my wife they murdered was Victoria Mellon. They slit her throat. Well, Typhoid Mary was Mary Mellon, and she would kill people with a butcher knife, just like my wife Victoria's throat was slit. And my wife Nancy Fredericks, my first wife, ran Warehouse 13. And every episode of Warehouse 13 marks my life like that. But it's all coincidence, Greg.
It's unbelievable. Every movie. Every movie I see, all day long, I come across these movies, and it's real obvious how they're marking some piece of your life.
Yeah,
A lot of times even by name.
Hugh
And,
Laurie, I'm Hugh and Laurie, and on and on and on and on and on. And it's all because my Aunt Gardner and her family gave you the first TV series on earth, Make Room for Daddy. And then I was attacked and kidnapped. And then the people like Daryl Hall, who had Daryl's TV and gave you people like the Eagles, you know, Joe Walsh, Glenn Fry. He was there and part of my kidnap, torture, and rape. You understand this? And these were the people who wanted to attack my family so they could be on TV. Ozzie and Harriet, Ricky Nelson. Now you have Bob Dylan. Some girls saying that he raped her when she was 12. Ricky Nelson, Kiki Nelson, his cousin. We were going to get married. Ozzie and Harriet. Oz, the Wizard of Oz. Well, Osbourne is the Wizard of Oz, Greg.
Right. Yeah.
And Ricky Nelson sings the Garden Party. I'm the Gardner family. The first lyrics in the song is Mr. Hughes hidden Dylan's shoes. And now Dylan is in the news because after writing a song about what a foul murder Kennedy's death was, now some little 12-year-old girl says he was grooming her for sex. At least it was a girl and not a little boy like me, Greg.
Right.
You know, but you see, this is a cover-up, and the cover-up's in all media. It's in all media, Greg, and it's been in all media for 7 decades. And you know yourself, you can look in every movie, they hire people like Andrew Jackson for their name so they can hide me and pretend to be me. Or they give you Kamala Harris pretending to be my family in the Smithsonian. And they're doing that in everything on earth, Greg, for 7 decades. 7 decades after murdering my twin, torturing me, selling me for sex, using me in all movies, all music, and there's no lie in this. I married George's wife. You got George Thorogood. No lie in this. I lived next door to the Hazel Park racetrack. Murray ran it. You got Murray's Auto Parts. The
Yeah.
White family. You got Betty White. Betty White, she lived across the street from me. No lie in this. All the movies in Hollywood, the billionaires, they hired people for their names so they could hide and mark me at the same time. Nobody on earth knows what I'm saying other than me. And it's the gay party that kidnapped me. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
These were all gay people, lesbians. They tortured me, kidnapped me, used me for sex in Oakland County, Michigan. And then they murdered kids and threw them on my properties for 20 years as they killed the Kennedy family. And there's no lie in this. This is the real history of the United States of America. And I'm never going to stop saying the truth. And they've murdered 4 of my wives now and dozens of kids. And now they just murdered that Duncan girl we were talking about earlier. As they marked me in V, in House, in Bones, I'm marked in all of them. Like there's no tomorrow. And you know this, Greg.
Yeah.
Angelina Jolie, her parents were my counselors at Warren Consolidated, where I went to school. And you know this, Greg.
One of them was the principal too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Webster funded the school. And when Austin and DuPont and Milky the Clowns, Claire Cummins, as they stole my trademark bottom line, Webster at my high school put bottom line in his dictionary the following year. The word was never in the dictionary until they stole it from me. I was 16 years old when they did that. It was $2 trillion, 28,000 worldwide entertainment contracts from Foley Federal Court, New York. And that's the theft they hid in the Twin Towers.
All you gotta do is follow the money. Starts with the theft of the.
Yeah, the guy who stole it, Jesse Ventura, helped steal it. Jesse Ventura helped steal it. He always told you follow the money. Well, follow the money at Bottom Line, New York. I own it.
Right.
Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Burt Reynolds, everybody in music, Ted Nugent, Bob Seger. I was the publisher. And I was working with every senator in the 99th, 100th, 101st sessions of Congress to change the Berne Convention laws so Bob Seger and Ted Nugent would get a paycheck.
Yeah, he made them tons of money.
As they murdered me in airplanes.
Billions of dollars, yeah.
As they murdered me flying in airplanes, Greg, at airports. And you know this is true.
Yeah, he took down your flight. Yeah.
And then every musician who needed me as a publisher to protect their royalties, they all deny I exist after 9/11.
Mhm.
They all deny I exist. You know, after 9/11, I was playing solo at Ted Nugent's club in East Detroit. And Nancy Frederick's father was mayor of East Detroit. I mean, really think about this. My second wife grew up in East Detroit next door to Iggy Pop and Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent's mother took me to the MC5 wedding. And really think about what I'm talking about. Anybody that watches this video, none of this is a lie. This is truth. And they've been hiding you. The musicians, Jesse Jackson. I'm the Jackson family. I own Baker College, where people like you, Greg, you go to get a degree to be a minister. Jesse Jackson, the preacher, I'm the real Jackson family on the 20. And he takes my Uncle Gonzalo's name. Jesse Gonzalez. Jesse is actually Jesus. Jesus is Jesus. You know, as I own Baker College, and it's built as JFK's murdered. And the high school on Hugh Street, and I'm Hugh, and I own the property, replaced John Fitzgerald High School as he was murdered.
And Jesse Jackson's married to Jacqueline, like Jacqueline Kennedy.
What's that?
And Jesse Jackson is married to Jacqueline, like Jacqueline Kennedy.
Is he? I don't, yeah, okay, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, well, Jacqueline Bouvier, I grew up with her family. Wayne Bouvier is in the Guinness Book of World Records for the lifting more weight over his head than anybody on earth in a contest called dead weightlifting. Gee, he was my buddy, Greg. We used to go out to breakfast and dinner together in Utica, Michigan. That's Miss Anna Sis's family member. And isn't it interesting? JFK's murdered while pointing me out in his last speeches. He says to you Tribune publishers, I'm on the front page of the Tribune. I'm a publisher. He's pointing me out in his speech. He's murdered. And she runs to Anna Sis as grown governors who are men are sticking their penises down my throat.
Right.
This is the truth of America's history, and they won't tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth till I die in videos like this. Back to you, Greg. You need to talk.
Well, I'm thinking gays probably had something to do with with Lincoln's murder too. The more I trace it, it comes from the actors and all that. I think this goes really far back.
Mac Osbourne is the Osbourne family. The Osbourne family were all gays. They were killing the kids in Oakland County. They were governor of Michigan. They came from London, Greg. Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy and Harriet, you know, I had to listen to the family that raped me as a kid on all radio growing up. Ozzy Osbourne. Ricky Nelson, Mr. Hughes, Hidden Dylan Shoes. None of this is coincidence, Greg. And this is the White House doing this to me after murdering the Kennedy family.
Yeah.
And Jesse Jackson, there's something about him. Oh, he created the Rainbow Coalition. Well, isn't that the gays?
Josephine Baker's Rainbow Tribe.
Yeah, isn't that the gays, Greg?
Oh, yeah, it is.
And then he uses the name Jesse Jackson. Jesus Jesse Gonzalez. That's my uncle. He married the Harris family. Jesse Gonzalez from Mexico City. He made Mexican food in New Haven, Michigan, and it was distributed all over the country back from the 30s to the 70s. And then his whole family was run over by a semi. His little kids, right in his driveway in New Haven, Michigan there, they ran his little kids over. And then Gonzalez and Sons was the name of the Mexican food. And this is why Biden appointed Gonzalez head of ICE.
Yeah. And Manning, he's trying to.
As a girl from Indonesia uses my Harris family name. He's trying to make it look like she's my family, and she's not. And I don't think it, I know it. My mother and her sisters, they never married Black people, and I didn't have any uncles. My uncles were murdered when my mother was 7. All her brothers were murdered by a semi on Clinton Road in New Haven, Michigan. There weren't any Harris men to make her pregnant,
right?
To have Kamala Harris. Complete fallacy. And I'm the family in the Smithsonian, and I don't think it, I know it. And I'm the
I was pulling up that name while you're saying
I'm the Fuller family in Battle Creek. They murdered her with all her sons, all her Harris sons. They ran them all over with semi trucks, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, and then hid your mom too. Yeah, and
my mother
cut her off.
My mother was in one of those accidents. A semi truck hit her. They hit me and Kiki Nelson with a semi truck twice.
Yeah,
I was stopped and the semi was going 100 miles an hour. Hit me so hard. I have 5 girls in my back seat. 2 of them were pregnant. It ripped the seats out of my Chevy van. Really think about this. They attempted to murder us twice.
Yeah, and semi. Yeah, just like they did then. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Right.
They've murdered 4 generations of my family, and my family was with President Lincoln in Ford Theater as Booth, the actor, shot him. And now all the actors in Hollywood have been in movies marking me, but I don't exist, and it's all coincidence, as they murder little kids all around me for 7 decades now, Greg.
Yeah.
And
So
that,
Biden appointed Garland, Stone Manning. He tried to appoint Tracy Stone Manning.
yeah,
That's unbelievable.
Stone cut the bone out of my foot pretending to be a surgeon, right? And
Yeah, and Manning from the JFK report.
And how
That's
long
right.
ago did I tell you that? 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
At least 3 years ago. When
At
I
least.
was a kid and they murdered Kennedy, Stone pretended to be a surgeon. He was running a hospital in Warren, Michigan. He cut the bone out of my foot as torture when they murdered Kennedy.
So Biden appoints Stone Manning.
And I also put in a Freedom of Information Act in the Warren Police Station where the detective was having sex with my first wife, Nancy Fredericks of Warehouse 13. And they denied me that. They wouldn't tell me where Stone is today. And that's Trump's best friend, isn't it, Mr. Stone? Put him in the White House. The guy that tortured me as they killed Kennedy.
And Flynn goes all the way back to Lincoln. Was Booth's friend, Booth's dad's friend.
Yeah, I grew up with
Lincoln.
Greg, I grew up with the Lincoln and the Flynn family. In my lifetime, it was Errol Flynn.
Yeah, Errol Flynn.
I grew up with Mickey Finn, which was a drink in a bar.
Flynn even came up with the America First slogan under Roosevelt. Another Flynn. This history goes so far back, it just keeps repeating. It just blows my mind all the time.
Well, I'm the real history of this country, and I'm not going to be quiet. And they can cover me up with, the more they cover me up with their movies and their music, the more obvious it becomes.
Yeah, and some people, it seems like, with the Merlin's Apprentice movies like that, it seems like they're trying to say people need to listen to Hugh, because if you do that, Camelot.
How long have we been making videos, Greg? About 4 years now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First video, I told you, I've had 4 wives dismembered and murdered. Haven't I been telling you that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe my wives were murdered and dismembered?
Well, I've even seen the hospital report for one of them. It'd be pretty hard to deny that one.
And I have an open murder case in Tennessee. And I went back and tried. I went back to Al Brooks Patterson's office. I did that when you knew me. And
right before
they tried to put me in jail instead of taking the truth of who the Oakland County child killers are.
Yeah.
Every state I drove through, a woman called and tried to tell me I was doing something wrong to the police, and I didn't even know these people. Every single state from California to Michigan, a woman from the military called and reported me for a crime I didn't do.
Yeah, what was his name? Peter Graham followed you around too, right?
Yeah, Peter Graham followed me around, and he lives in Florida, and he's married to a woman a third his age, and that's Graham Trucking and Graham Media in Michigan. And Graham is a non-union trucking company. Gee, you think maybe they wanted Hoffa dead?
Yeah, and there's Graham the traitor right there in the movie. Graham right there in the movie.
And then you had Billy Graham in the White House, and now you got Jesse Jackson in the Senate and White House. All the poor guys got COVID with Jacqueline, using my Uncle Gonzalo's name, Jesse, and my last name, Jackson. And he's not my slave family.
Right.
I doubt his name is even Jackson. He's probably a CIA operative as they murdered
It seems more and more obvious, doesn't it?
as they murdered Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah.
See, no wonder he doesn't have to pay taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
just got a letter from Social Security today, said I owe him $8,000.
Well, what are they doing? You think maybe the blacks are attacking me?
Yeah.
Oh, you think maybe they're attacking me, Greg? And why? I'm not prejudiced. I lived with a black family growing up. I lived on an Indian reservation. And then I got off the Indian reservation and I lived with the real Jackson family who were black. So anybody thinks I'm prejudiced, I'm not. But I've had blacks attacking me. And then what's my trademark? My trademark is Bottom Line Music. It's a federal publishing license. How have they hidden me? They've hidden me
BLM.
with
Bro Land
BLM,
Management.
as they murdered Nancy Fredericks. When they let the Bundys out of jail, they murdered Nancy Fredericks. And then after that was over in the media, they gave you Black Lives Matter, BLM. BLM is my stolen trademark. Bottom Line Music, New York.
People started to forget about that. They'll come up with
Advertising
another
and
one.
Publishing, New York. I've owned it since I was a little kid. I created the word, made it my trademark with Weiner and Associates. 2 lawyers stole it from me, and they even wrote a book for the lawyers bar in California to study out of and pass the bar exam. For 50 years, they used my stolen trademark for every lawyer on earth to study out of. As they made movies, marking my life, that at the end of every movie, anything that's, how do they phrase that? Any likeness to anybody living is purely coincidental. Sure it is.
Yeah. Right.
Sure it is.
Well, they're even using your name in half.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman, and you get Hugh Grant.
Wolverine from Michigan, Wolverine's
Hugh Grant from England, as I'm put in charge of ASCAP grants.
Yeah,
I could have gave you $100,000 loan to go to college, a grant, so you didn't even have to pay it back.
Yeah, and Hugh, the mayor of Hughville in Back to the Future.
Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope and Graham and the governor of New York put me in charge of ASCAP and BMI grants, and you get Hugh Grant from London, of all places.
There was even a Hugh in that Merlin movie too. They even used your name.
I'm well aware of that, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
In Warehouse 13, they murdered Kiki and Terry in Warehouse 13 series. They murdered Victoria Mellon. And they even murdered them the same way my wives were murdered. You had, Oscar Tyler Moore and Mary Tyler Moore. They were my family's friends, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They murdered Courtney Moore. They murdered Nina, who was my mother-in-law. They murdered Amy. They murdered Larson, who was my next door neighbor. He was one of the drug dealers I stopped. They murdered, two of my wives were murdered because they couldn't breathe. That's how they murdered them, slit a throat and hung the other one. They couldn't breathe. They even made a movie pilot with Jeff and Eric. Jeff and Eric married Nancy Fredericks. Jeff Lavoie, and you watched Lavoie Finicum get shot live on TV by the FBI as they murdered Nancy Lavoie.
Right.
They didn't tell you about Nancy Lavoie or her son Eric. They just put him in Warehouse 13 as Jeff and Eric, his kid. And the name of that show was I Can't Breathe. The very way they murdered 2 of my wives. But it's all just coincidence, Greg.
Oh yeah.
That's just one TV series. They all mark me that way, all of them. Mm-hmm. And the people they hire for their names, the majority of them are too stupid to even know why they were hired.
Yeah.
You go to a screening, you're Greg Bowe, if Pitney Bowes wants to do a commercial, they might hire Greg Bowe to do the Bowe commercial,
Right.
But they were hired for their names by billionaires who kidnapped me and murdered kids in Michigan, and then they murdered your presidents.
But
They
some
were
people like
taking-
Harrison Ford, he might know.
I do know those people.
No, I'm saying Harrison Ford, he may understand why he was hired. Maybe he understands.
Well, who was his leading lady in Star Wars? And Star Wars was cast at my house in Troy, Michigan. The last
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. That's
But
right.
I don't exist.
Yeah.
But I don't exist. His leading lady was Fisher. I grew up with the Fisher family, and my family owned the GM patent on the General Motors van.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the Fisher body is on a General Motors van. I grew up with the Fisher family.
Yeah.
You know, and then people call me a liar and crazy. They don't even know who they're talking to. I worked with the Fisher family for over 10 years, designing robots. And then you got Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. When you build robots for auto companies, that's what you do. You sit there and in Bud boxes, and Bud was my father-in-law. You sit in Bud boxes and you terminate. Connections to Modicon or Allen Bradley controllers. Well, Allen and Bradley screwed my wives when I wasn't at home, sitting in a Bud box terminating. Those were the detectives who were supposed to protect me. Allen and Bradley. You know, and this is my whole life is like this, Greg. And you know, Alice Cooper's family raped my daughter after kidnapping her. Another East Detroit native.
Oh, hold on. Let's go down that road for a
Well,
second.
she was 7, you know, and then you got, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, there's the Coopers you're talking about. You knew DB Cooper as a kid, so the FBI came up with DB Cooper, and then you came up with Big Bang Theory. Not you, the movies came up with Big Bang Theory on TV, and then Sheldon Cooper, and then you had young Cooper, Sheldon Cooper, as a series that's on TV.
Well, it goes even farther than that, Greg. General Cooper is in charge of the Indian reservations and the treaties.
Yeah.
United States Cavalry, General Cooper. That's the family that kidnapped my daughter, General Cooper's family.
I know.
And then you have On a Pale Horse from William Cooper. When I rescued my daughter, he was shot in his Harris County driveway, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, all about he's your hero. He's your hero. Right. He rode on a pale horse. And gee, it was my pale horse they buried Jimmy Hoffa under as they kidnapped my daughter and raped her. You understand?
Well, get this. On that show, on Sheldon Cooper, on that show, as a kid, when he's a kid, his principal was named Peterson. And that was the same Peterson you were talking about. That was Angelina Jolie's family. That was your principal.
Yeah, that's my counselor at Warren High, as I was a teacher.
Yeah.
And I was a teacher teaching science and electronics at the Abrams tank plant employees.
Right.
Military science and electronics to Abrams tank plant employees, military people.
So they made Cooper the scientist, and still gave the world Peterson as his principal instead of you as the scientist.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what they've done to me my entire life. And then at the end of the movie, they say any likeness to anybody living is purely coincidental. Bullshit. What's Huey Lewis in the news about? That's not his real name, Huey. What's Billy Squire from Freddie Mercury about? His real name isn't Squire.
Right.
Craig is chief of police in Detroit right now after Gilbert Hill. And I knew Eddie Murphy and Gilbert Hill when they made the first Eddie Murphy's first movie. I was down in Key West with them. You know, this is everything they tell you on TV. It's bullshit, lies, and propaganda, Greg. There's no truth in our media or the news. Anderson,
except when you occasionally get somebody like Christian Ford out there making a movie like this.
Nick Anderson kidnapped me as a child. Nick Anderson was his name. With Osbourne, Wallace, Long. These were governors. Nick Anderson, The Matrix, Mr. Anderson. Neil, Who was Neil? Oh, that was my torture. I was on my knees, Neil.
Right. Yeah. And they turned it in.
My birthday's on it. If I remember right, my birthday's on his driver's license. None of this is coincidence. And this is the gay political party that kidnapped me at birth, stole my inheritance with my mother's sisters, Christie, Gonzalez, Zabicki. These people stole my inheritance. You understand this?
Yeah.
And my inheritance wasn't anything small. And it wasn't enough for them to steal my inheritance. Then they murdered my wives. And they stole my federal publishing licenses as they marked me in every movie on earth.
Oh, it was enough money to make all these movies. It was enough money to send people to run for president, governors. It's enough money for Ava Gardner to gamble $80,000 a day. Yeah, it's quite a bit of money.
She gambled more than 80,000 a day. She lost that much a day.
That's what I mean. That's just, and that was back in the 40s. That would have been huge money, or whatever, or 50s, or whatever it was. That was huge money.
It was all mine. It was my money, Greg.
Yeah. Right.
It was left to me. And then they forged my name on the stocks from Rooney.
When it made his 60s, yeah. Whenever it was.
Remember,
Yeah.
Ava Gardner married Mickey Rooney. And
Right.
Mickey was my oldest brother who raped my fiance in front of my kids.
You even have something with his name on it, where on one of the wills or something, I think.
On the stock. I still got the stock.
Yeah, it was on the stock. Yeah.
From Rooney and Company. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable what they did to me, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
And Biden and Camelot are doing the same thing right now.
Yeah, pretending to be Harris. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, her name's Harris, but her name
Harris. They appoint Gonzalez as head of ICE after I stopped Noriega's guns and drugs, hiding me. And they're pretending they're the heroes, and I don't exist. After stealing trillions of dollars from me at birth.
Right.
At birth. They were sticking their penises in my mouth at birth, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
This is unbelievable who America really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you a truth on here on this video. Every country that's ever fought the Taliban and lost no longer exists. And Russia, all of Russia broke up 2 years after they stopped their war with Afghanistan. And gee, look what's happening now. You got a president who doesn't even know what service his kids served in.
Yeah.
As his vice president runs off to Vietnam because there ain't no COVID there, and she's from China. Real interesting, isn't it? And gee, she was prosecutor in California, where they gave you movies like Kill Bill as they murdered Bill Milan, my wife's father, who was Navy Special Forces. He ran the Macy's parade in Hudson's. He was a cook at Hudson's his entire life and helped run the Macy's parade. A Japanese man murdered him as he was the star in Kill Bill. In Kamala Harris's Hollywood there, where she was prosecutor. And the prosecutor there, she wants full-term abortion so she can sell full-term organs. And this is who your vice president and president are. You know.
Yeah, this is the most evil administration by far, and
it's been getting worse.
Probably even get worse.
And I'll be surprised if you have many more administrations. All of your secrets were just handed to China for free, for 1.5 billion to a crackhead. Yeah. 1.5 billion to a crackhead. And now now all of a sudden your president has dementia and his vice president sitting in Vietnam. What's she doing? Trying to find some more dead American bodies from 60 years ago? She's not even doing that, you know.
No.
And you know, I told you the CIA ran to Vietnam last year. You know, I told you.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody else does, but you do.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else to say, Greg?
Well, I'll end it with Robert Byrd. Your uncle died the year that you were kidnapped, 57. March 11, 57.
When my wife was murdered, the Byrd family left me a letter right at her bedside the day before she was murdered.
That's right. Yeah.
She was
Amazing.
murdered Halloween day. The Byrd family was at my wife's murder, Greg.
You have to explain that one to me. We'll make another video on it sometime. So we've probably gone long enough for tonight, but interesting.
Well, the Byrd family there in Johnson City is another one of those Baptist ministers, Greg.
Mm,
You know, the people who didn't give me a paycheck for 2 years after murdering my attorney
mhm.
on his way to file murder charges with the district attorney and Slater and
Yeah.
the attorney general. Oh, they murdered him. Yeah, those Baptist ministers murdered him.
Mhm.
Interesting, isn't it? How all these ministers and priests, Jesse Jackson and Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker and Billy Graham, they all want to hide me, the little Catholic kid related to the president they murdered.
Yeah.
And then as they steal my inheritance, and it was no little inheritance. It was buses, vans, milk trucks, and the biggest publishing company on earth.
Interesting. They killed JFK a Catholic. Yeah. All right. I'll see you next time.
There.